Welcome to Breakthrough Conversations with Coach Pete, and I'm Gloria Leibecker, co-host. Pete, I've been working with a client recently, actually for several years, and they've really struggled with how to first develop relationships of trust and then how to maintain them. And I want to just recognize that our world, our culture is so different than from when I was a young adolescent or a young adult. And so I know it's difficult for me to navigate in real time, but now there's the complexity of all of these social media and gaming platforms where people are meeting and making all kinds of relationships. Unfortunately, they're not always who they say they are. What's your experience around that or coaching people around relationships?
Well, yes, and my clients represent a lot of different age groups,
Yeah,
from 20 somethings, 30 somethings to quite a bit older, to the fourth quarter of life people.
yeah.
And everybody is in some stage of relationship or relationship with relationship.
Mhm.
And it's really interesting. And yes, it is different, for me and for you, thinking about today and
Yeah.
what relationships are like. But I do think that a lot of it hasn't changed. I mean, some of the factors that affect relationship changes, like social media, the media explosion, we get bombarded with so much information. Wow, how do you process that? That's a factor. But when you come right down to one person connecting with another person, there's still some basics, right, to hold on to. And I think sometimes people need some guidance or help uh, maintaining that focus, that it's not out here, everything happening around, it's what's happening between one person and another and how to develop that relationship. Now, the challenge to me comes in, the extra added challenge is when you've had a relationship that doesn't work out for whatever reason and that ends for whatever reason. And then how do you go back into, quote, the game of socializing, dating,
Mhm.
finding that person? And not be affected by the previous relationship. I find a lot of those issues involved in coaching, helping people clear it out and move forward without the restrictions of that relationship gone bad.
Yeah, I find that too. And a big part of that has been we talk about slowing down a lot because we're in a fast-paced society. When we can slow down our own inner world and our own thinking to begin to recognize what I bring up values a lot. What is it that I value or what's really important to me? And that I value what's important to me first, regardless of what's happening with that other person. I'm also a professional mediator in the state of Washington, and so I've done quite a few different mediations with families. And a big part of what I love being, rather than calling myself a mediator, I like to coin the phrase, I'm a peacemaker. And if it's not going to work out between them, can they remember what attracted them in the first place in order to dissolve the relationship in a harmonious way that actually is a blessing for one another? And that is possible. And it does require that you actually slow down and tap into what do you really value? And then wishing the best for others. Instead of a lot of people, they can get caught in the hook of resentment. And that starts to actually get in their head. And then they start what's known as your default mode network that keeps playing these inner messages. It can come in and it can tell you some things that aren't very helpful.
Right. And what you said reminds me of something with some of my clients that have gone through divorce, whether it's immediate or whether it's in the past, they haven't really recovered from it yet to move on. And some people use the phrase, oh, my marriage failed. And I'll say, well, how long were you married? They say, oh, 20 years. I said, well, how is that failure? You kept a relationship going, the two of you, for 20 years, maybe raised a couple of kids or a kid or two. Where's the failure in that? We want to label things. And the other thing that you said that reminds me, a lot of my discussions with clients about relationship is to remember what started the relationship in the first place. It's usually, not always, but it's usually out of some very positive feelings, love, caring. And then, life happens and it can be difficult to keep a relationship going.
Mm.
It's important, I think, you mentioned it in mediation or peacemaking, which I love that phrase instead, um, to remember. So it's not so contentious. Remember those positive feelings. Okay, maybe it hasn't worked out at this point in time. Does that mean you have to negate those years together, those feelings that brought you together? And particularly, this is important if children are involved to help avoid that tug of war between two divorcing parents, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Uh, so I think those are important to really think about.
Yeah, and when you have two people that are willing to peacefully come together with the intention of finding a path that maybe they haven't thought of before, that can be a beautiful experience for everybody, because most of the time they haven't really slowed down enough to hear each other because they're too busy in their heads thinking about what they're going to say next. So again, that slowing down is so key to actually have effective communication. And one of the things I would love to see more of in our world is the preliminary things before you get into a relationship, for there to be opportunities for people to get to explore and discover, well, what does it look like to begin those casual conversations? What does it look like to get to know another person and to be known by another person? And for there to be some education around that, that would be experiential, so that people could grow through the experience and develop the confidence they need to know that their voice matters and that there are no have-tos in life. And yet, because of the ideals or because of the labels, our society tends to think they know something when they can label it, and they stop being curious and interested in it. And so I don't know,
Right.
but I do want to hold space for the people that may be having some broken hearts, because that's challenging. But I do want people to know that there are resources available, and to not to give up and to go out and look for those, like what you've been talking about and I've been sharing as well. In fact, you are a great resource for people.
Well, thank you very much. And there are resources out there, people you can connect with,
Yeah.
Um, and so much of it comes down to, when you're talking, reminds me of self-esteem and self-confidence. If you enter into a relationship without good confidence and self-esteem, that's that's where things can go awry. You kind of give up yourself, or you know, or you're not in touch with what your needs are, and you don't have that confidence. And same when a relationship does break up, to restore that self-esteem and self-confidence is really, really important. Because it
Yeah.
all starts, so many of our conversations lead to this. It all starts with what's in here, what's in your heart,
Mhm.
and to be in touch with that, all that positivity and strength that we all have somewhere inside of us. It's good to reconnect with that. And that's so important in relationship. Getting in a relationship doesn't mean you give up yourself.
Mm.
Quite the opposite. A good, thriving relationship, there's two people with strong self-esteem, maybe obviously different views, different life experiences, but that can, with strength, that can really be a combined, wonderful, growing relationship.
Yeah, and those relationships do require nurturance. So I guess after the first bloom is past, many people can get a little bit bored. And so it's important to really, I don't know, stay interested and think of ways that you can keep the spark going, because that's important too.
For
Thank you
sure.
for this conversation. I've really enjoyed the exploration, and we covered quite an area.
We
And again,
did.
I want to encourage people, reach out to Coach Peter, myself. If you're struggling in your relationships, we're here to support you. Thanks.